Hello, everyone. This is a Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and we have our resident AI explorer today, Kareem. So, Kareem, how are you going today?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I'm not sure how relevant the AI Explorer title is going to be in this conversation, but we'll give it a crack. And yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of other interesting stuff to talk about in addition with this topic that we got planned today. So
Yeah, fair enough. But don't sell yourself short, mate. But
thanks.
I think people might have first noticed that Mystery wasn't able to make it today. But what we're actually going through today is what I'd like to call the zero point 0.5 series. So I think the purpose of the zero point 0.5 series is going to be, look, we cover a lot of revolutionary topics on the main channel, but I think there's a lot of decent case studies that you can kind of analyze with any of the topics that we've covered on the main channel. And one of the main ones I thought which would be decent is, you've talked about in the past about, the capabilities of Hume AI and the way you can kind of use that with experiments. And I know you know that I'm a huge proponent of social deduction games and all of that. But I actually wanted to ask you the question, could you use that sort of AI technology to do a decent experiment with, something like Blood on the Clocktower, like one of my most favorite social deduction games. But I'll keep the question general. Do you think that AI has the capability in order to do an experiment and at least measure our interactions within a social deduction game?
Yeah. Look, I definitely think there is potential for it there. So I guess, look, my train of thought is why don't we break down what Blood on the Clock Tower is first?
Oh,
Um,
good call. Okay, so the reason why I said Blood on the Clock Tower is it's probably one of the most famous Australian social deduction games. So, look, I might have explained jargon with jargon. So, social deduction games are it's your classic. You have a good team, you have an evil team. The evil team is like a small number of people that know everything about the game, and then the good players are the large amount of players in the game that don't know anything about the game. And the evil team are basically just trying to survive to the end of the game, whether that's by sowing misinformation or just lying through their teeth. And then the good players are basically trying to suss out who everyone is and find the evil people and vote them out of the game.
so
Now, yeah, you
Yeah,
were gonna.
if I can just interject, I think that the most sort of fascinating aspect of social deducting games for me is that um, there are people who are tasked with deceiving other people, and the remaining players are tasked with seeing through that deception via a series of logical deductions that they have to
Hmm,
piece together. So there is that sort of critical thinking aspect to it where you've got to put the pieces of the puzzle together and try to figure out like what's actually happening.
hmm,
But the other element of it um, is you have to be able to see through people's lies if you're on the
hmm.
good team, and you have to be able to deceive if you're on the evil
Yes,
team. So I guess if I was looking at this from an AI perspective, I think we'd be able to um, I think we'd be able to learn some fascinating things about deceit in general.
yeah,
When do people deceive? How is it perceived? Like which lies work, which ones don't? What are the situations in which people might deceive more often?
hmm,
Is there potentially what are the protective factors um, towards like insulating yourself from deceit? So like those are sort of the broad brush questions which I think
yeah.
AI might be able to answer. in that environment. But I'm sure we'll get into it.
Well, I guess to kind of add to those points, I think what makes Blood on the Clock Tower at least a really good case study for this is that a lot of social deduction games with, the evil slash good dynamic is what ends up happening is it becomes a game of j'accuse, and people are kind of just yelling back and forth of,
Sorry,
no,
what was that
you're
last word?
evil. Sorry,
What was that
j'accuse?
last? Yeah, can you explain that?
J'accuse. Oh, it's just French for like I accuse you of this, I accuse you of that. It's like
Okay. Yep.
so like yeah. But basically it just ends up being a game of like, no, you're evil, I think you're sus, no, you're sus, no, you're sus. That's the
Yeah.
reason why, like, I guess the kids like Among Us, because they can basically just say like, oh, red sus, no, yellow sus, and like
Yeah.
that's it. But like, look, that's a tangent. But
It's like shooting a gun in every direction and just hoping it hits something.
oh yeah. Well, yeah, because like my nephews absolutely love Among Us, and it's because you can just basically point to anyone and accuse them of anything, and they just think it's hilarious. But again, tangent. But
Yeah.
what makes Blood on the Clock Tower great is, look, you can do the traditional, hey, I think you are bad based on vibes or based on like the way people act in a social setting, but what's great about Blood on the Clock Tower is there's also a puzzle element to it.
Mm.
So they are characters that get verifiable information about other people, but everyone has that sort of role. So a townsfolk is a player that gets a good ability that helps town. An outsider, again, also on the good team, but it's an ability that hinders the town. Then you have the minions and the demon, who also have good abilities for their team, but they're obviously on the evil team.
Yeah. This is where I think it gets even more interesting because when you're told of your role, and you're told like what your powers are, sort of,
Mm,
within the game, um, that role may make you a more or less desirable target for the evil teams. Let's say you're in the good team.
mm,
In terms of getting you out of the game, like if your ability is like high powered and has the
yeah.
potential to change the game, then the evil team is more likely to target you. So what I think is interesting in this aspect is, um, even if you're on the good team, you still have to be strategic about who you choose to divulge your information to.
Yeah.
So you might make a decision not to divulge your role to certain people because you suspect that they're on the evil team. So
Yeah.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that this is one of the first games where there's potentially an incentive for someone who's on the good team to also engage in some level of deceit. Is that
Yes. No, and I kind of want you to hold that thought, because I'm thinking in the kind of experiment, honors slash aspect of, going to a uni and, pitching this kind of idea.
okay?
And
Yeah,
I think I'm thinking in the mind of, doing a literature review of like, what is the, I guess, the theory behind you presenting this kind of idea.
sure.
And I think we have to talk about uh, consequentialism and non-consequentialism,
Hmm.
because I think that's a good basis for this. Because
Can you tell me
as
more
you
about them?
yes, because as you know, I love my philosophy. So consequentialism and non-consequentialism is kind of like the initial like 101 of like meta ethics and the discussion of morality within society. So quick pass on both of those terms. Consequentialism is the idea of your actions, and you, when you do make an action, you're kind of maximizing the good and minimizing the harm. So just to use the standard philosopher that's used here is, John Stuart Mill, and like utilitarianism. So I'll use a specific experiment to kind of explain these ideas in a sec, called Joe and the Indian. But I'll just quickly go over non-consequentialism, which is the complete opposite, which is that actions intrinsic within themselves are either good or bad. It has nothing to do with the cause and effect, much like with consequentialism.
Okay,
So,
so
like
it's
the typical example that's used is, like, oh, something like the Ten Commandments, like you shouldn't kill anyone, you shouldn't lie to anyone. It's
okay. That makes sense.
but yeah, like it's the action within itself, whether it's good or bad. Like the common philosopher for that is Immanuel Kant and like his deontology and like categorical imperativism. But like again, that's a massive rabbit hole, and I won't go into that and
Yeah.
confuse
Okay.
people.
Cool. Cool.
But
So
those are like the two broad categories, and I will use a thought experiment to kind of reinforce those ideas. So the easy, like classic one that we used in Philosophy 101 was Joe and the Indian, where what you imagine is you're Joe, this explorer, and you're kind of walking through the jungle, and then you get to a massive clearing where there's like a warlord that's standing in front of six Indians, and you wander on the scene. And you're like, "Hey, what the hell's going on?" And he looks at you and he's like, "Hey, these guys have approached on like encroached my land and stole my wood and my food." I was about to punish them, but actually, since you're here and an upstanding citizen, I want to give you a choice. Since you don't agree with this situation, he hands you a gun and he says, "I want to make an example to this tribe. If you kill this one guy, I'll let the others go, and I'll see that as an example. Or if you don't want to get involved, that's fine. Just keep on walking, and I'll kill all of them." So
mm,
a consequentialist would look at that situation, take the gun from the warlord, and shoot the guy that he was told to shoot, because the maximum good, according to them, was saving the five and killing the one.
yeah. Yeah.
Because as consequences go, sure, the it can be argued that killing a person was was immoral, but at the end you save so many lives, so that
So it was
kind of
worth it. Yeah.
it was worth it. Whereas the non-consequentialist would be like, "Hey, I'm not being involved in this situation. Killing is wrong, and it's part of my ethical code to not kill. I'm kind of removing myself from the
But
situation,
I don't care
and
who dies as long as I don't kill. Is that?
it's not necessarily uh, it uh, it's not necessarily that I don't care about the situation. It's that uh, I am not doing any moral wrong by standing on the sidelines. Like it's out of my control. There's obviously the Rambo choice, which is
Kill
what
everyone
people
or
do
kill the
do in
warlord?
yeah, in undergrad. What happened was some people would be like, "Oh, well, I've got the gun. I'll just shoot the warlord," and
Yeah.
then like the lecturer was
Yeah.
like,
You're missing the
"Yeah,
point
but
here.
he
Yeah.
obviously has his men there as well, so you'll die in the process, and
Yeah.
then they'll kill the Indians anyway.
Yeah.
So like you've saved nothing."
Okay.
Um,
So
but uh, but yeah, like those are the two moral conundrums, and those are the broad differences between those two
yeah.
theories.
So I guess how that might wind up playing out in the game is, firstly, like you don't get any control over what role you get. So the story master sort of assigns you a role in Blood on the Clocktower, and I
Mm.
guess if you're a non-consequentialist, um, getting put into an evil role could be quite difficult for you to sort of navigate that terrain if you've got some pretty firm lines that you're not willing to cross under any circumstances. um, it's going to be a lot harder for you to actually survive as a member of the evil team. um, Whereas, if you're a member of the good team and you're a non-consequentialist, then um, I guess there's going to be a difference between what like, let's say, take the difference between withholding
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
and actively deceiving someone else. So let's say, like we're in the game, I'm an overpowered role.
Yeah.
Um, you're an evil player, and you
Mm.
ask me, what's your role? Now, I might say, yeah, I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you.
Yes.
Um, or I could make up something and just give you false information.
Mm.
Um, my comfort level with making up false information could boil down to consequentialism versus non-consequentialism. Like if I'm sort of against lying altogether, honestly, if I'm against lying altogether, I probably shouldn't be playing the game to begin with. But
Yes, but like no, but I think what you've pointed out was that I feel like the Blood in the Clock Tower in general is that your good team tends to lean towards non-consequentialism because that's the whole thing. It's like the initial when you are a storyteller, the initial story that you're supposed to tell is, once the night phase happens, if you will, like people, like the evil team gets their roles, the good team gets their roles, and they kind of act during the night. When it's the first day, what you're supposed to do is is come into town where it's like, hey, you are the people of the sleepy town of Ravenswood Bluff, and you're woken up by a blood-curdling scream, and what you found is your storyteller has been strung up on the clock face of the clock tower in your town, and you realize that the only reason for this is that there is a demon amongst you. If you are the good team, you must find this demon and execute them. If you are the demon and the minions, you must survive to the end of the game without being executed. Like, the good team is incentivized to look for that justice. So they are actively trying to suss out the other players and to see who is telling the truth and who is not telling the truth, which is
okay,
very non-consequentialism.
but
And going back to what you were saying before, can you be a non-consequentialist and be on the evil team? Um, that's actually been a hot topic in the community in the sense of,
really, okay,
can you actually get away with not lying as an evil person? Which
interesting.
I think what it was boiled down to is that what you have to do is just omit some of the truth. Like, you're kind of still being a consequentialist.
Okay,
It's just you're kind of minimizing your harm in terms of the outright lies that you're telling. But still,
but
your base is still consequentialism.
I
And
mean, if you have to vote on people dying in the game, um, like I mean, I suppose that I mean, everyone knows it's a fictional death, so like you're not actually, yeah, crossing that line in terms of your own moral behavior. If you got to vote
yeah,
on executing someone, or if you're the evil team and you're working out who to assassinate during the
yeah.
night. But yeah, look, I think it plays out differently for the good and the evil team. So you're saying, like, as it so you're saying it's possible to play on the evil team just by withholding information without actually making anything up. Look,
You know what?
run me
I
through
think
this one, because like the logic of it itself, I'm not entirely sure how it plays out. Like I would have thought, if you want to avoid getting accused of being evil, at the very minimum, you've got to have some sort of cover story. You've got to have some sort of explanation for what your role is, or why you're not divulging your information, or like what you're doing there to begin with, because you're going to get asked questions. Like, it's a social game. You can't really get away without talking to anyone.
um I kind of feel like with that assertion of, hey, it's just the omission of truth, and like you don't have to actively lie. Like, see, the thing is, that's kind of the reason why I prefaced with, hey, if you're on the good team, um, your kind of prima facie, or your beginning starting point is consequentialist, and with evil team it's consequentialist. Is that, well,
Okay, I see. Yeah.
you're kind of deceiving people at least from the start, even if you are the evil team. And like, let me envisage a scenario that, say, one of the bluffs, because you know the demon gets one of three roles. Sorry, they get three roles of characters that are not in the game. Let's just say one of those three roles is the Saint, and the Saint is an outsider. They are a player that, if they are executed by the town of Ravenswood Bluff, the game immediately ends and the evil team win if like people execute them. There's, I guess, a omission of truth aspect to it where you could pretend to be the saint and be like, "Hey guys, I'm the saint. Uh, yeah, please
Please
don't
don't
kill me,"
execute me.
and then just sit back there for the rest of the game where everyone's like, uh, basically pointing the finger at other people, and then you end up winning the game without really saying too much.
Hmm.
Like, at the end of the game, at the end of the day, you're still got those three bluffs, and you're still actively told that misinformation of, "Hey, I'm this role," and sitting back. Like,
So
the baseline is consequentialism.
yeah, yeah. So I'll leave that. I'll ask you two other questions. Um,
Yeah.
so you're saying that there's like a trajectory of your moral evolution over the course of the game. So what you start as might not necessarily be what you wind up as. So the picture that you're painting is, um, if I start as on the good team as a non-consequentialist,
Yes.
um, after I've executed like five people, I've voted on their executions.
Yeah.
It starts to get a bit more consequential in terms of my thinking. Whereas if I'm on the evil team and and I start off as a consequentialist, I might start feeling bad after I've assassinated like five people.
Well, I think I want to go back to your initial talking points when you were talking about how, um, as a good player, you might be incentivized to lie
to
to other
deceive, yeah.
people if you're a powerful role. And see, that's the thing about non-consequentialism, and especially like the Immanuel Kant version, is that one of the downsides they say with non-consequentialism is that you can have duties and you can have moral imperatives that conflict with other moral imperatives. So let's say um, let's say that you are the townsfolk, the empath. Like, that's a fairly easy one to understand. It's basically you learn whether your neighbors are evil because the storyteller gives you a number. If you
Mm,
get 0, means none of your neighbors are evil. 1 means one of your neighbors is evil. 2 means, both of your neighbors are evil. That's pretty self-explanatory. So it does what it says on the tin. So say I'm in, first night, I'm in the game. I get a 1. I know one of my neighbors is evil. I might speak to one of my neighbors, and I probably lead on that I'm a role that constantly gets information, but I'm a bit stum as to what my character is. Like, I don't want to lead on exactly and come out that I'm the empath. Like, that withholding of information, or maybe I just straight up say like, "Oh, I'm the Raven Keeper," because which is a role that that their ability triggers, and they get good information, and like the demon doesn't want to kill them. Like, I might provide false information because I know I can't really trust my neighbors. One of them is evil.
mm.
So whilst the non-consequentialism of my role of, hey, I want to seek justice, I want to execute a evil person in order to save the town of Ravenswood Bluff, I kind of my role kind of delves into the non-consequentialism of, hey, I'm a good information, like I'm a good role, I'm a good information gathering role. I might just lie a little before the benefit of town at the end of the game.
Okay, so you're talking about, I guess, engaging in deceit with the purpose of obtaining more information. So not necessarily with the purpose of harming someone else um, or even getting joy out of deceiving them. Like really, like I'm picturing a scenario in which maybe someone might choose to, rather than reveal their own role, they might choose to trade information about someone who's been cagey throughout the game, who hasn't wanted to share their role publicly throughout the game. So,
There actually is a tactic that people will do where, say, for example, Kareem, we're both playing, and you come to me and say, "Hey, 4AS, I'm the fortune teller," and I turn around to you. I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, if you've hard claimed to me, I'm happy to hard claim to you. I'm the empath." And what we actually no, I'll use the Raven Keeper as an example. You say that you're the Raven Keeper. I say that I'm the empath.
so
We
what does
might.
a Raven Keeper do again?
Oh, so if they're killed in the night, they actually get to see somebody's role. So like they're kind of incentivized to trick the demon into killing them. So
Ah, okay.
so let's envisage, we both talk to each other and we're like, you know what, we're just gonna shoot in the dark, hope that you're a good person, and we'll just believe in each other and hard claim to each other. What we could essentially do is you say like, oh, I'm the Ravens keeper, and I'm like, oh, great, Kareem, I'm the fortune teller. We could swap roles, so we tell everyone else that we're
We're a
the
different
each other's
role.
roles.
Okay.
So in the hopes
That's
that
interesting.
uh, in the hopes that the demon stays away from me because I'm the Raven Keeper, and the demon kills you because you started saying that you were the empath.
Okay. So if I know that I'm more likely to get killed as a Ravens keeper than an empath, then I might trick someone else into swapping roles with me as a Ravens keeper.
Well, not necessarily trick, but like you both agreed to do a mutually beneficial action
Okay.
that you can
Mhm.
get more information and I can keep on getting more
But
information.
am I withholding the level of benefit to me by not mentioning, hey dude, you're gonna get killed as a Ravens keeper. Like,
No, 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 because the demon is incentivized to not kill the Ravenskeeper though. Because
they're incentivized
because
to not kill them. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, because they don't want to give the Ravenskeeper information
Yeah.
because they might end up picking the demon.
Okay. Yeah.
And then because like the thing is, I guess the other major mechanic we haven't touched on is that like you can be drunk and poisoned in this game where yes, everyone has like an ability, everyone has a role with an ability. The evil team can also tamper with that information. Like there's a minion ability called the Poisoner, which they pick a player during the night and they poison that player. So if they were to get good information, they end up getting bad information. So
Okay. So you're kind of being deceived by the game itself. Like,
yes,
it's,
yes, but
uh,
in the instance that we haven't been picked by the poisoner or any sort of mechanics that kind of like mess with our information, that kind of swapping of roles. Um, if I'm just saying to people, "Hey, I'm the Ravens keeper. I kind of trust you," and say I accidentally said that to the demon's like, "Oh, great. I'm not going to kill 4AS." And if you say, "Hey, actually, you know what? I trust you. I'm the empath," and you've spoken to the demon might be like, "Oh yeah, Kareem's a really good uh, person to kill." They kill you in the night, and you, as the Ravens keeper, happen to pick the demon. Then that's like ironclad information, and you can go to town with it and then win the game. So like that sort
yeah.
of like it's mutually beneficial, potentially sowing misinformation to the town in general, but it's for a good cause.
Yeah. So yeah, this is what's sticking out to me is just how many different ways you can be deceived, and how many different incentives there are to deceive others, or not even incentives, but maybe justifications for deceiving them. Or where do you draw that? Like it's because it's starting to sound like it's not it's not really a hard and fast line between withholding information and actually manipulating someone else. Like
Yeah.
manipulation's probably is probably sort of, I won't say go between, but you can engage in manipulation like without deceit. You can guide someone's thinking
Mm.
into an outcome that you desire through the information that you share with them,
Yes.
and have them arrive at a conclusion that you wanted them to arrive at, um, not necessarily without by making up information. Um,
Yeah, because I like at this point I really want to emphasize to people that yeah, like obviously there are other social deduction games where you do have characters that, you know, collect information about other people. Uh, but in those other games, there's only like certain characters that have it, and then everyone else is kind of vibing. Like they're just like a villager, like if you were playing werewolf or something like that, and you have to read people's social cues and go from there. The thing about Blood on the Clocktower is that everyone gets a role, has a power, so the game is split into two types of players. There's obviously the traditional vibe check people that are like, hey, I'm analyzing your social cues and seeing based on those social cues whether you're a good person or a bad person according to the rules of the game. And then there's the hardcore trying to unravel the puzzle people from the ironclad, or at least appearing ironclad information. And they are much more analytical, where what they do is what the community calls world building. So, for example, I'm the fortune teller. I have a very powerful wall. I'm trying to build a world where a certain player is the demon and what minions are in play. So,
okay,
is
so it's,
there is there a spy in the game where they can see all the characters that
yeah,
are in play, and like, you know, the demon's been making some pretty good kills by killing all the powerful players. Does that mean that there's a spy in the game? Hey, I've spoken to another
it's
character, and they said that I was an evil player. Oh, and I find out that they're an information gathering role, but they know that other people's roles are what they say they are. Have they been poisoned? Like, that's where the world building aspect comes in, where
yeah.
you get more analytical.
This one might be interesting because I personally think the beauty of the game is that um I think in order to be effective at the game, you need to do both. You need to do some level of sort of social cue reading, um, but you also need to have that logical deduction, that analytical mindset. And it sounds to me like you're constructing plausible realities based on the information that you've collected. And I think
Hmm.
that's probably a process that I won't say most people, but because different people play the game in different ways. But the idea that you're trying to um, construct the most plausible explanation that covers all the information that you're hearing. Now that might be some combination of working out who has deceived you,
Hmm.
um, and working out who has told you the truth. But you may choose to flip those roles altogether and be like, okay, like this is how it played out in my head. It's like two people, like in one reality, two people were the evil team, and the
Hmm.
people that they were accusing were the good team. And in another reality, it was just swapped altogether. And I'm like, okay, who do I actually believe?
Yeah.
But I think it just to put the AI lens back on it again, um, I probably not so much potential for learning on this front, but that construction of plausible realities,
Hmm.
that world building aspect that you talked about, I think that's something that AI would actually do really well. Like if you program the rules of the game into it and you feed it in the information that 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 you've obtained, it would actually sort of be able to work out by itself the probabilities in terms of this is the most likely explanation for what's happening. This is the
Mm.
second most likely explanation for what's happening, and at least give you the ability to sort of see over the games and maybe think about plausible realities you haven't considered. Because keeping track of all the roles, keeping track of what the different roles do, how they interact with each other, um, for me, that's half the challenge. Like
Mm.
it's hard for it's a steep learning curve for playing this game. Like if like it's still fun and everything, but in terms of actually understanding the mechanics of the game, it can be incredibly difficult. I don't fully understand it to be. I'm still heavily reliant on you for a lot of explanations. But you take sort of the pieces of information that you've got and you try to piece it together to do the world building that you describe. But I'm wondering,
Yeah,
like,
but I keep on saying because like I guess our friendship group that does play these social deduction games with us, and I keep on saying to them because like I'm the storyteller that runs these games is that what's really important is you have to use your storyteller as a resource. And I keep on saying to you and the guys that hey, if you just turn to me and you're trying to figure something out, just turn to me and say, hey 4AS, can you tell us the possible worlds in this scenario that say somebody like this specific person is evil and this specific person is good. I will tell you, and I can also tell you that the two people in the recent game that we were playing, um, they were looking at the bluffs that I gave them, and they noticed that there was an outsider amongst them, like a player that is, unhelpful to town. And they looked at it and they turned to me and they were like, hey, 4AS, why did you put an outsider in there? Like, why didn't you just put a whole bunch of like really good townsfolk? And I turned to them and I'm like, well, so you can build a Baron world because a Baron is a minion that puts outsiders in the game. And I was like, one of you can pretend to be an outsider and then build a world where there's a Baron in game and that one of the players is possibly poisoned. They're drunk. And they were like, oh, okay, we'll just go with that because they asked the right question. And I think for a majority of the game, the entire town thought that there was a Baron in play because one of them decided to choose the outsider. And people were confused as to whether it was actually a Baron was in play or not. So just simply asking the storyteller the right
will
questions.
give you access to information. So, all right, let me ask you this then. Um, Two angles. Firstly, as a
Okay.
storyteller, do
Okay.
you think different storytellers will approach consequentialism versus non-consequentialism differently, or do you think that in that role, you're sort of tasked with leaning in one direction? And secondly, to what extent do you withhold information, manipulate, or deceive as a storyteller?
Ooh, that's a really good questions. Okay, see, as far like everyone, uh, the first part I would say in that is that I guess I was listening to um, Brian Cox and Robin Ince in their recent episode on the Infinite Monkey Cage on actually games in general. And what they were saying is what's kind of great about games is the the ability to kind of play out these sort of roles in an environment that everyone kind of feels safe and kind of play out these roles which especially in social deduction games they're technically like unacceptable to kind of manipulate your friends in a real world setting compared to like a game where you're an evil person or a good person. So like I kind of want to use that framing, but um to answer your question directly, the incentive of the storyteller is they are trying to balance the game. As far as we're concerned, a good game is a game where the game goes all the way through the days and nights and leads to three people being alive. One of them is the demon, one of them is a good player, and the town has to talk about all the information that they've gathered and determine, hey, who's the good person, who's the bad person, let's execute the bad person. And as far as I'm concerned as a storyteller, is that I'm trying to keep it as balanced as possible. If, for example, uh, the good team is just absolutely romping through it, and they're looking like they're in really good stead. I might give a little bit more misinformation if somebody is, say, poisoned or drunk, in order to bring it back to the center. Or if evil are absolutely romping through it, and the good team have no idea who the evil team is, I might give a little bit more information to someone who's, for example, poisoned or drunk, to indicate that they are actually that way. So, again, they might question their information if they've been trusting it before. Like, my incentive is to get to the final day and for everyone to kind of have a good time. So, um, I guess in a like in a few words, the point of the storyteller is to be a chaos merchant and for people to be uh, like have the best time and get to the final day. So he is somebody who is actively pulling the strings. And one day I might all be for justice and helping the good team um, in order to find who the demon is. But then the next day, I might be pulling the strings of helping the evil team who aren't doing so well. So I give that extra piece of misinformation, um, or I omit the truth that would have been really helpful for for town, and like for the townsfolk and the outsiders who are on the good team. So my that's why I kind of feel like what's good about this game is that you might have the starting place of, you lean towards non-consequentialism or you lean towards consequentialism, but the game actively pulls the strings whether you're trying to solve the puzzle or trying to vibe who's a good person and a bad person. And you're kind of incentivized to like ebb and flow between consequentialism and non-consequentialism, even though you have a basis in one of the camps. And
Hmm.
that's what I find so fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely has a way of, I guess, pushing your moral boundaries into questionable territory, regardless of whether or not you're on the good or the evil team. Um, yeah, there are situations you can imagine where you might be behaving in ways you're not proud of in real life. But look, I mean, I suppose that the other sort of angle that I wanted to cover with this is,
Yeah.
like, we talked about, like, the philosophical angle and consequentialism versus non-consequentialism and the morality of it. um I'm also interested in the psychology behind what actually happens in this game. And I guess if I was
Yeah.
putting that psychological lens on this game, we've talked a bit about deceit, about manipulation. What we haven't talked about, I guess, is um, personality traits, and
Mm.
how those personality traits might wind up sort of influencing what's actually happening in the game. So, say for example, one of the personality traits is agreeableness. Um,
Mm.
Agreeableness dictates, um, like how likely, it's pretty self-explanatory, but at the opposite end of agreeableness is hostility. Um,
Mm.
So, someone who's agreeable may be more likely to trust the information that they're getting, or may be more likely to want to cooperate with the other people,
Mm.
as opposed to someone who's hostile or who's low on agreeableness,
Mm.
and might be sort of tasked with, well, not tasked with, but they might be predisposed to confronting others, or not going along with the game in some way, or being that chaos merchant. So
Mm.
I think, and personality traits are quite fascinating. The other one that I'd point to is neuroticism as well.
Mm.
So neuroticism sort of represents uh, how worked up you get over certain situations, or how anxious you get. How, what's
Mm.
what's your sort of baseline, like, emotional regulation look like. So someone who's high on neuroticism could potentially think everyone's deceiving them. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just having a guess at this. Whereas someone who's low on neuroticism um, might be a bit more calm and rational in sort of their approach around. Okay, let me focus on the facts. Let me be more analytical with this. But the other interesting dimensions to go into would be like personality disorders. They don't
Right.
sort of use that I mean, there's a whole bunch of terms that they don't use anymore, but things like narcissism and psychopathy.
Right.
Um, Typically, the people that have sort of been and these narcissism and psychopathy, I think it's better to think about them less in terms of, are you a narcissist or a psychopath, or do you have a personality disorder or not, and think about them more in terms of a spectrum. So
Right.
everybody has these features, but to different extents. Some people might be low on narcissism and psychopathy. Some people might be a bit higher on it. So I'm thinking, would it actually be possible from looking at people's interactions in these games to
Hmm.
determine aspects of their personality or where they might sit on these spectrums? And
Well, well, actually, I think let's go back to the idea of turning this into experiments. Like, obviously, we've talked about the literature review, which is the consequentialism and
mm,
non-consequentialism. But could you, in this instance, could you focus the experiment? So, let's say we have, the Zoom setup, or we're able to use like the Blood on the Clocktower app, which is the online one. We can see everyone's screens. You have the Hume AI that's able to analyze people's faces and to know when they're like maybe upset, whether they're happy, whether they're sad, in terms of the
yeah,
interactions and all of that. Could you maybe what you could do is it's a two-part thing where you have the game and you have the people that are interacting, and the AI is getting the necessary data from those interactions. But at first, what you do is you get people to kind of fill in a maybe a self-identifying uh,
oh,
self-identifying like
fascinating.
survey as
Yeah,
to how they see themselves,
yeah.
and
Wow, I
like
didn't even think about that.
yeah, and then maybe then what you could do is um, you can analyze the difference between the self-perception and the fluidity that they're able to go between these different roles, and maybe see how comfortable they are, and then
Yeah,
you can do like then a closing questionnaire where it's like, hey, how stressed did you feel in these games? How comfortable did you feel? How
yeah.
did this make you feel? Blah blah blah. And then maybe you can do some sort of analysis there. Like, what
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
think?
Look, there'd probably be a million ways to approach that. The amount of experiments I'd be able to run on this game, like ridiculous. But all right, let me first break down what Hume AI does, because you've mentioned it a few times. Quite simply, Hume AI takes video of your face and interprets what emotions you are experiencing
Mm,
based on that video. If you are talking, it can also pick up on patterns in your tone, frequency, speech prosody, I think it's called.
mm,
It can detect from the way that you talk what emotions you might be experiencing as well. So it's limited in that regard, strictly to emotion recognition. That's what it's designed to do. Um, Now, would emotion recognition be helpful within the context of the social production within Blood on the Clocktower? Um, yes, and to go back to your point, like if we've got video footage of people's faces while they are interacting with the game, because the app's set up that way, or we're playing it on Zoom, then that would be a really valuable data source for emotion recognition. For the other stuff that we're talking about, we'd probably need to design something else. But there's a couple of different ways to approach it. Um, it's been a while since I read up on this, so forgive me for being hazy on the details, but
No, no.
Typically well, not even typically, but supervised learning. So the idea behind supervised learning is if you tell the AI this is what we're looking for, and you feed it a whole bunch of data, it will go looking for what you told it to go looking for.
Right.
So if you feed it the rules of the game, or you feed it the rules of whatever it is that you're looking for, it will learn over time to get better at that. Unsupervised learning is a completely different paradigm. That's where basically you give the AI a whole bunch of unlabeled data. So say for example, the labels that we might use for this game might be something along the lines of is someone lying or not? So if you think of that as a label, or is someone good or evil, that would be sort of a label that we could put on the data that the AI gets. If we take those labels off altogether and say to the AI, here's a whole bunch of video footage, figure it out. What the AI is what we've developed systems that are able to label the data themselves, basically. So it finds patterns in the data that you didn't tell it to find because you didn't tell it anything to begin with. So whether or not it's now in this situation, sometimes the labels will be helpful. Like if the AI knows who the good players are and who the evil players are, if the AI knows what the roles actually are, then it might be able to infer a little bit more about their behavior than otherwise. But it can be quite a fascinating experiment to just dump the whole data into it and be like, what do you see that we're not seeing? Because what patterns it uncovers, but I'm not entirely sure how they sort of go over the patterns and work out what they represent and stuff like that. But it may just have to be a manual process in the data, but it may wind up learning some really fascinating things about human behavior, like by consuming this data. The other, sorry, I'll just finish up this.
Go for it.
The other angle that I want to put on it is the time progression, because we talked about like sort of how your attitudes to consequentialism and non-consequentialism might change over time throughout the game. Now, if the AI had time-stamped data, let's say let's take a snapshot of you at the start of the game, in the middle of the game, and at the end of the game. Or let's say we've even been able to feed in some additional details from a survey that we captured before the game, or a survey that we captured after the game. If it has those comparison points, it may be able to chart a trajectory of certain things that we're looking for over the course of the game. Whether or not it could break it down, I don't think it'd be able to break it down into like consequentialism. I think that's way too advanced for it at this stage. But could it work out if someone's lying or not? I think that's I think that you would be able to design a system that could actually work out who's lying and who's not. Now, if you've got data on who's lying and who's, like, let's say you've successfully managed to work that out from the data you were given.
Yeah.
The next question that I have from that is, okay, which lies worked, which lies didn't? Because if someone's lying and they successfully convinced another person, that's a successful to see if that lie worked. Yeah. Whereas someone who's lying who didn't manage to convince the other person. And there's probably a spectrum on that end as well of how much do I actually believe what I'm hearing, because that's not going to be a yes or no answer either. So stuff like that can be really hard to wind up labeling. Like,
yeah, but like that would probably be where human AI comes into importance, right? Because I'm sure there's visible cues as to whether somebody believes in someone's lie or not.
Here's the
Right?
thing, like they haven't actually, like, this one's actually contentious in psychology. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Last time I checked, well, look, when I was going through it, 7 years ago,
Okay.
The official line was, "We have not been able to detect a correlation between facial expressions and deceitful behaviors." Now, if you talk to like a detective who's tasked with like questioning suspects, they'll tell you a whole bunch of cues that they're looking for, like a
Yeah.
person's tell, um, that gives them an indication as to whether or not they're lying.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the specific research on it, but that was the official line that we were getting, like back when I was studying it. Whether or not there's been research that's happened since, I don't know.
Right.
On whether or not human AI, like the emotion recognition, would actually be able to detect those features. That specific system's been trained to recognize emotions. It hasn't been trained to recognize like deceit. Could you train a system to recognize deceit? Look, I think you could. Like AI will be able to detect patterns that we cannot.
Right.
Um, so you'd probably want a much simpler data set to work it on though. Like it'd be really like complicated to and I guess
So
you
what
know
I'm yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is that at least currently what we have is programs that we could use that could suggest adjacent things. Like, for example,
emotions.
let's say I'm the demon and you're the empath, and you happen to be sitting next to me. Actually, no. Revise that. I'm a minion. I haven't received any bluffs yet, and I'm speaking to you as the empath, uh, who knows their role, but I can't I can't bluff as anything yet. And say Hume is able to see that my face is like extremely nervous and I'm like extremely cagey. You've like in the conversation that we have, you kind of suss out like, Gabe didn't, sorry, 4AS didn't give me like uh didn't really give me anything.
Yeah,
I
but
think he's most likely lying.
okay,
Uh,
but the reason why you can't infer deceit from that is because I'll tell you, the first time I came to play the game and I was on the good team, I was flustered as well. I didn't like the whole thing was so overwhelming. I don't know what the hell was going on. I was excited, nervous. I didn't like so like if a system which if an emotion recognition system were trained on both of us at the same time, it might find identical emotions, but for very different reasons. That's why you can't use
yeah,
emotion
okay.
recognition by itself.
Yeah, I guess maybe that might have been where it was leading, is that why I was saying the adjacent stuff. Like you could register that someone is nervous, but in your experiments, that could potentially create a false positive. Like,
Yeah,
so, uh,
because you haven't like you haven't worked out. Like, don't get me wrong, it would be really interesting. Like say a more relevant. Let's say we had the emotion recognition technology trained on the game, and
yeah,
let's say we were able to label the data with was someone lying or not. Now I
okay,
know there's a spectrum with this stuff, but let's just keep it simple for the moment. So we've got a data source. We've got video footage of people's faces while they are
mm,
playing Blood on the Clocktower. We've got technology that can recognize emotions from that video footage. If we were able to add an extra label to that data, that label being is someone lying or not,
mm,
then from that we would be able to work out, okay, the people that are lying, what emotions are they experiencing? The people that are not lying, what emotions are they experiencing? So
right,
that's how like adding labels to the data gives you a different lens through which to look at whatever it is you're looking at. In this case, it might be emotions, um, but once you've got different categories for your data and you can sort of go back and pass it on that level, you can start asking far more interesting questions. Now, when you've got the problem with labeling data is if you want an AI to do anything useful on it, you need a fair bit of data. Um,
right,
and labeling data is quite intensive. Now, let's say you're trying to apply the label of is someone lying or not. If I'm sitting there going over video footage of people playing the game, I might not even be able to tell if they're lying or not.
Right.
Like, so the labels themselves might be incorrect to begin with. They might not be
Right.
accurately labeled. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you've got inaccurate labels on that, then how does that affect your interpretation of what emotions are people experiencing when they're lying versus
Mm.
when they're not? So this is what my understanding is. This is where unsupervised learning came from.
Mm.
This idea that we got a whole bunch of data, we don't know actually unsupervised. Now that I think about it, have you heard of the game Go?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Chinese equivalent of chess, right? Yeah.
It's something like that. Apparently, it's well, I've never played Go,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there was a really famous AI system called AlphaGo, that was
Right.
developed by DeepMind.
Yeah.
Um, I could be wrong about this, but like my understanding is this is where unsupervised learning came from, because what they found was when they were programming the rules of the game into the AI,
Yeah.
there was a limit to how good the AI could be in terms of being able to beat human players. Yeah.
Right.
Once they got out of the way, once they said, look, we keep telling the AI what to do. What if it knows better than us? What if we don't program any rules into it at all and just see what patterns it's able to detect? The
Mm.
the performance of the system that you didn't tell it what to do, like outpaced the performance of the AI where that was programmed with the rules. So
Right.
this wound up being like the system that beat the world's best Go player. And I was watching a
Jesus.
documentary about it. Yeah, this guy was like 9 time, like he was acknowledged as being the best Go player in the world. Yeah. And the
Yeah.
AI was able to come up with like these really like novel solutions to different problems. Like there were, I'm probably going on a mad tangent about this,
No. 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 But I feel like this is relevant. Keep on going.
yeah, just those me on this last one. There were things that like professional players acknowledge as being faux pas within the game, things that you're not supposed to do. Yeah.
Right.
Now, when the AI made these faux pas in the game, it got ridiculed. People were saying, like, who the hell does that? Why would you do something like that?
Yeah.
But it wound up being that the AI had actually spotted that it was appropriate to make a move that humans didn't think was the right move to make. And the wisdom of that move emerged a little bit further down the track.
Right.
Yeah, so the AI wound up actually winning that game. So it's fascinating stuff in that. Like I think within the context of um it'd be a bit harder to apply that same sort of thing within a social deduction game. But what actually I'd love to speculate on this. Can you imagine if we were able to attach a large language model to an
Yeah.
AI that was trained on Blood on the Clocktower? It might actually wind up being able to suggest strategies or suggest like gameplay that
Mm.
you could use to be able to navigate the game correctly, like depending on your role. So that's some pretty advanced analytic stuff. It's probably a
Yeah.
fantasy. It's
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess what I'm hearing is like if we go back to the experiment uh the experiment idea that we kind of had is that basically to get what we want we would basically have to create the necessary AI models in order to test whether somebody is lying or um, uh, like you. I guess you could end up still using Hume AI, but you would have to use it along with other things that you specifically make it for this experiment in
so
order to test what you necessarily want to test.
yeah. So I think that the best way to think about it is like as a first pass, um, run it through Hume AI so that you can put more labels on your data. Like, we have a system
Right.
that's trained in emotion recognition. Let's feed it the video footage that we have and work out what emotions people are experiencing, and then bring it back. And now we've still got our data source, but we've now got extra labels on that data. We've got what emotions people were experiencing in that moment. So
Right.
valuable information, yeah. It allows us to ask questions about what emotions arise under different circumstances, like within the game. Because that's the other question that you would be asking is what elicits these emotions in people, yeah. Which aspects of the game draw out certain emotions? Or if we've got those surveys, let's say if we've got a personality quiz at the start of it, we might be able to work out what's like, take neuroticism for example. If we know what you perceive your baseline neuroticism level to be, we might be able to, I guess, take it with a grain of salt what emotions you're experiencing in the game and work out, is that because of your personality or is that because of something specific within the game? See how that extra label now opens up another dimension in terms of the questions that we can ask about the data that we have.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Or
No, it does. And like what I'm hearing is that like even if you don't outrightly like you can still use that like literature review if you will of like
sure.
consequentialism and non-consequentialism, but
Like,
maybe what you could do is you could use like, hey, when you're performing these sort of roles, what emotions do you feel based on what you have based on what you're doing, and then maybe like uh if you have the opportunity in order to create the necessary AI to test whether you are actively lying or not, like you can use that in future like future experiments. But like, there's still like decent ground for you to cover if you just cover, hey, what emotions are you feeling when you're playing these games?
mm,
And like, what role are you playing in order to play those games? Because obviously
like
you can have hypotheses where it's like, oh, well, maybe you're feeling a bit more nervous when you're on the evil team. Maybe you're feeling a little bit more relaxed when you're on the good team, and then see whether that's actually dispelled or not.
let me stay on the emotion one for a little bit longer, because that's technology that we already have. So it's more so within the realm of possibility what we can do with it.
Mm,
And look, I probably should mention, there's disclaimers all over this stuff saying that, like, we shouldn't rely too heavily on it, and there's still a chance it might not be as accurate as we think it is. But let's just assume that it is accurate, for the
mm,
moment. Um, the other types of questions that we would be able to ask is, like, if we've got the label on our data of what roles people were playing, we might be able to work out what types of emotions different roles are predisposed to feeling. Do certain
right.
roles feel some emotions more than others? We might also be able to work out, like, let's say if we've got the video footage, and the thing that I love about the Blood on the Clocktower app is you can go into these individual video sessions with different players, and sort of, so you can talk to people one-on-one in a video sense, or you can talk to them two-on-one, or you can have
Mm,
groups of different sizes. I think it's an awesome mechanic to include in the game. But if we had that emotion recognition technology in the mix, we would be able to work out, okay, people who interacted with this player, what emotions were they experiencing more often?
mm.
Did ever, like, and I guess you can't. I think I know where you're wanting to go with it. Like, can you sense whether or not someone was cagey about it? Cagey isn't really an emotion, but
Yeah.
it's like hesitance. I don't even think that's like, I think this technology identified. Um, it was in the 50s. I think there was about 50 or so emotions.
Right.
Um, I could be wrong. There was at least like 28, 29, at least 28, 29 emotions that it was able to identify, but like the number could actually be higher. So, like, when you think of emotions, how many emotions can you think of?
Oh God.
Just as a rough guess, like,
Maybe,
the
maybe like. But see, like, there's some things like that you even pointed out right now is that you think they're emotions, but they're not really emotions. But I would say I'm probably, uh, I would say 15. I'd be solid on, and I'm wondering if another 10 are like I think they're emotions, but they're not really emotions.
yeah, yeah, and it's like emotions are hard for a reason.
Y-
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah.
just all you need to do is, have you ever seen an emotion wheel?
No.
It's worth googling. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
wheel. It's got like I think usually how it works, and there's different kinds of wheels, but usually there's an inner wheel that's got like core emotions. So like it'll be like happy, angry, um, sad. Like
Yeah.
it'll have these basic emotions, and then the next layer of the wheel goes into a bit more detail about what that emotion is. So it might be like happy, might be um, excited, or
Elation.
surprised, or elated, or like you're
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
to add a level of specificity to the emotions that you're experiencing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how far down the rabbit, I can't even remember how many emotions are on the emotion wheels, but it probably is around the 50 mark, to be honest. So but these things are hard to identify, is my point. um
Right.
could we work out whether or not someone's lying? Like, is caging an emotion? I might actually be wrong on that one.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like, I like the. It sounds comically low the number I said before, but
I'm
like
feeling
but
okay. I
sometimes
might be feeling distrustful. Feeling betrayed is definitely an emotion. Um, yeah, there's a unique emotion to feeling betrayed. That'll definitely show up on an emotion wheel. Feeling distrustful. Um,
sometimes you do
yeah,
wonder whether it's like it's an
like
adjective or it's
cautious.
actually it like yeah whether it's an adjective or whether it's like genuinely an emotion.
Yeah, yeah. Look, cautious is definitely an emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like we would be able to pick up on. I'm pretty sure human AI would be able to pick up on that. So you could start asking questions around like which players were more cautious, what were the circumstances under which they were more cautious, which roles were more cautious.
Hmm.
Um, if I've got that footage of like um, which players were people more cautious of. That'd be a fascinating one, actually.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, no, I can see where you're going with that. Like, just with the emotion question within itself, there's like plenty of ground you can kind of cover within
Mm.
an experiment. But yeah, I guess just to kind of close out our discussion today, like I think what makes using this game over other ones just quite fascinating is that it actively wants the players to um, vacillate between a what would traditionally be a consequentialist or a non-consequentialist frame of mind, and I think for an experiment it'd be incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, and I think those like those situations in which we can elicit stronger responses from people, those situations in which we can get people to step outside their comfort zones, um, I think are more indicative of what humanity is really like. Like, it's
Hmm.
when the seas are calm, like there's not a whole lot of information to deduce what humanity is really capable of. But once sort of you're putting people in these really difficult situations and start forcing them to make decisions and behaving in certain ways, and I guess potentially compromising their morality. I think that you can wind up learning some very interesting things about humans.
Hmm. And to close this out, Kareem, you knew this was coming. What's that synthwave art? What do you think the prompt is for this one?
Um, I feel like you put deduction in there. There doesn't look anything social about it.
Okay, what the prompt actually is Cortana and AI analyzing data and producing ethical behavior. Are you
Producing ethical.
familiar?
Okay, so the analysis is what I got. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all the screens in the back. That's
I might have
that's
used the
what AI
prompt
thinks
of
analysis looks like. Yeah,
yeah, pretty much.
yeah,
I might have used the context of Cortana from the Halo series, but
yeah. I was wondering, was it the Microsoft Cortana or the Halo one?
yeah.
I'm a bigger fan of the Halo one. So
So yeah, that was your synthwave art for this week. Again, Kareem, thank you for joining me today on this zero point 0.5 series. I thought we had a good talk about social
yeah, me
deduction
too.
as well
Yeah, some
as
interesting stuff in there.
yeah. And remember everyone to keep thinking and keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode.